The late afternoon sun stretched long golden rectangles across my bedroom floor the day everything changed. At the time, I thought it was going to be an ordinary Thursday. The kind of quiet afternoon that had become so common in my life that the hours blended together without leaving much of a mark behind. I was folding laundry at the edge of my bed, moving slowly the way I had learned to do after turning 68, careful with my knees, careful with my back, careful with the silence. Then the bathroom light flickered again. Not dramatically. Not with sparks or noise. Just a weak trembling pulse above the mirror that flashed once, steadied itself, then flickered again like it couldn't decide whether it wanted to stay alive. And somehow, standing there with one of David's old sweaters folded in my hands, I felt something inside me flicker too. Before we begin, if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the like button. Your support truly helps us continue sharing meaningful stories like this one. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from tonight. I always love reading them. At the time, I didn't realize that broken light bulb would become the beginning of something I thought my life no longer had room for. Companionship. Hope. Maybe even love. You see, after my husband died, the world became quieter in ways I hadn't known were possible. People think grief arrives like a storm, loud and violent. But for me it arrived more like dust settling slowly over furniture. Silent. Gradual. Persistent. David had been gone for 4 years by then. 4 years of sleeping diagonally across a bed that still somehow felt empty. 4 years of cooking too much soup and throwing half of it away. 4 years of hearing a funny story and instinctively turning my head to tell someone who wasn't there anymore. People stop checking on you after the funeral. They mean well, I suppose. Life pulls them forward. Their children need rides to school. Their jobs demand attention. Their marriages continue unfolding. Meanwhile, grief freezes you in place while the rest of the world keeps moving. At first, friends visited often. Then occasionally. Then only on holidays. Eventually, the silence became my most reliable companion. I developed routines because routines are what lonely people build to survive themselves. Morning toast with strawberry jam. Chamomile tea at 2 in the afternoon. A mystery novel before bed. Feeding the cat at exactly 6 every evening because she would howl if I forgot. The floorboards in my hallway had become so familiar that I could tell where I was in the dark simply by which plank creaked beneath my feet. The third step outside the bedroom groaned sharply. The one near the bathroom let out a softer complaint. The kitchen boards crackled faintly near the sink whenever the weather turned cold. A house learns you over time. Or maybe you learn the house. After enough years together, the relationship becomes mutual. That bathroom light started flickering sometime in early October. At first I ignored it. A small thing. Easy to dismiss. But the strange thing about living alone is that tiny problems become enormous because there's no one else to absorb them with you. A flickering bulb isn't just a flickering bulb anymore. It becomes evidence of your solitude. Every time the light trembled above the mirror, I noticed it. While brushing my teeth. While washing my hands. While staring at my reflection longer than I meant to. Especially then. Because age changes the way you look at yourself. You stop searching for beauty and start searching for familiarity. Sometimes I'd catch my reflection unexpectedly and see traces of the girl I once was hiding beneath all the years. Other times I looked like a stranger wearing my face. The light made everything worse. Flash. Steady. Flash again. Like a weak heartbeat. 3 weeks passed before I finally admitted I needed help. The decision itself embarrassed me more than it should have. David used to fix everything. The sink. The cabinets. The porch railing. Once, when our washing machine broke at midnight, he sat cross-legged on the laundry room floor for 2 hours with a flashlight between his teeth until he figured it out. There's always a way to repair something, he used to say. After he died, I discovered how many things in a house quietly depend on one person paying attention. I looked up the handyman number from the community newsletter after lunch one Tuesday afternoon. Even dialing the phone felt strangely intimate. My fingers hesitated over the buttons. I realized I hadn't invited a man into the house since David's funeral. The woman on the phone sounded cheerful. "Yes, ma'am, we can send someone Thursday around 3. I almost canceled right then. But instead I gave her my address and thanked her twice. When I hung up, the kitchen suddenly felt smaller somehow. The faucet dripped softly beside me. Outside, wind stirred through the oak tree David planted 30 years earlier when we first moved into the house. Back then it had barely reached his waist. Now its branches brushed the power lines. Time sneaks up on living things. Thursday arrived wrapped in rain. The kind of steady gray rainfall that makes the entire world feel quieter. Water streaked the windows. The sky hung low and heavy. By mid-afternoon the house smelled faintly of damp earth and chamomile. At exactly 3 o'clock the doorbell rang. The sound startled me badly enough that I nearly dropped my teacup. I opened the door and found a man standing on the porch holding a weathered leather tool bag in one hand. He looked to be around my age. Maybe a little younger. His hair was mostly brown with silver beginning at the temples. Rain clung to the shoulders of his jacket. His expression carried the. I followed his gaze instinctively. David planted it, I answered. The sentence slipped out naturally. Usually when I mentioned my husband's name people became uncomfortable afterward. They'd apologize too quickly or change the subject or offer sympathy. I no longer knew how to receive. Thomas simply sipped his tea. My wife loved gardening, he said quietly. Loved. Past tense. I looked at him differently then. What happened? I asked gently. He stared into his tea for a second before answering. She collapsed in the garden 2 years ago. Hard issue. 1 minute she was staking tomatoes. Next minute, he stopped and shook his head once. Life changes fast. No dramatics. No self-pity. Just exhaustion tucked carefully beneath composure. I recognized it immediately because I carried the same exhaustion myself. We stood in silence again. Not awkward silence. Shared silence. There's a difference. Rain hammered harder against the windows. Thomas touched the broken fixture lightly with one finger. Sometimes connections loosen over time, he said. Doesn't mean the whole system is ruined. Usually just means something needs attention. I knew he wasn't only talking about wiring. And judging by the way his eyes briefly met mine before looking away again, he knew I understood. Something shifted between us then. Small. Invisible. But real. Maybe it was simply recognition. Two lonely people spotting themselves inside another human being. I surprised myself by speaking honestly. I still talk to my husband sometimes, I admitted quietly. Mostly in the mornings. Thomas didn't smile politely the way most people do when they don't know what else to say. Instead he nodded slowly. I still set 2 coffee mugs out by accident. The confession sat between us warmly. Human beings spend so much time pretending grief is something we eventually conquer. It isn't. You learn to carry it differently, that's all. He told me his children lived far away. California. Florida. Because another person's presence inside my home felt startlingly alive. The house sounded different with him in it. His tools clicked softly against each other. The ladder creaked beneath his weight. I could hear his breathing. Steady. Calm. Rain tapped the windows behind us. For the first time in years, the silence inside the house no longer felt empty. I realized suddenly that I had forgotten what it sounded like when another human being simply existed nearby. That realization hurt more than I expected. I fussed with the towels hanging beside the sink just to give myself something to do. Straightened them twice though they were already perfectly aligned. Thomas worked quietly overhead. His hands moved with confidence. Slow deliberate movements. No guastidmotion. I noticed a faint scar above his eyebrow. A wedding band still resting on his finger. That surprised me. Widowers often remove rings eventually. David's ring still sat in my jewelry box wrapped in tissue paper, because I couldn't decide whether putting it away permanently felt respectful or unbearable. After a few minutes I escaped to the kitchen to make tea mostly, because my nerves needed occupation. As the kettle warmed, I found myself listening for sounds from the bathroom. The scrape of metal. The shift of the ladder. The quiet murmur of him testing wires. Strange how quickly another person's presence can begin changing the atmosphere around you. The kettle had just started whistling when Thomas appeared in the kitchen doorway carrying the old light fixture carefully in both hands. Well, he said softly, I found the problem. He set the fixture on the counter. Dust marked his fingertips. I poured tea automatically and handed him a cup without asking first whether he wanted one. Somehow I already knew he would say yes. He accepted it with a grateful nod. Steam curled upward between us. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then he glanced toward the backyard. "That oak tree's beautiful," he said. Cautious politeness of someone used to entering strangers' homes carefully. "Afternoon," he said softly. "I'm Thomas." His voice surprised me. Gentle. Unhurried. Not the loud confidence I expected from repairmen. He wiped his boots carefully on the mat before stepping inside. And something about that tiny act nearly broke my heart. You notice kindness more when you've gone a long time without seeing it up close. I led him toward the bathroom, suddenly hyper-aware of everything around us. The dust near the hallway vent. The stack of unopened mail on the side table. The faint scent of lavender cleaner lingering in the air. He followed quietly behind me carrying his tool bag with practiced ease. When we reached the bathroom, the light flickered as if performing for him. Thomas tilted his head upward and studied it silently for several seconds. Most people rushed to fill silence. He didn't. That was the first thing I noticed about him. Stillness. The kind that comes only from people who have lived through enough life to stop fighting every moment. He set down his tools carefully and asked when the problem started. I answered with more detail than necessary. 3 weeks ago. Mostly evenings at first. Now worse in the mornings. Funny how loneliness makes you hungry for conversation. Even trivial conversation. He listened attentively anyway. Then he glanced toward me. "Do you live here alone?" The question wasn't intrusive. Just observant. Still, it landed somewhere deep inside me. "Yes," I said after a pause. "It's just me now." He nodded once like he understood something I hadn't fully said aloud. He asked if I had a ladder. I brought the old wooden one from the garage, the same ladder David used every autumn to clean the gutters. The wood had been worn smooth by decades of hands gripping it. Thomas positioned it beneath the fixture and climbed carefully. I remained standing in the doorway pretending I wasn't watching him. But I was. Not because of attraction. Not at first.